Keir Starmer mocked as even the House of Commons admits he doesn't answer questions. When even the official House of Commons social media account quietly stops pretending the Prime Minister answers questions at Prime Minister's questions, you know we've reached peak Keir Starmer. For an entire year, the Commons dutifully posted every Wednesday that Sir Keir answered questions from MPs, a claim so demonstrably false that they were getting roasted weekly by anyone with functioning eyeballs and a Twitter account. But since the new year, the wordings mysteriously changed. Now it says he faced questions, which is technically accurate in the same way saying someone faced a firing squad is accurate, even if they didn't successfully dodge the bullets. It's the parliamentary equivalent of changing your dating profile from great conversationalist to shows up to dates, an admission that the bare minimum is all you're getting. So let's dive into this beautiful bureaucratic surrender to reality, explore why Starmer's become the undisputed champion of not answering questions, and figure out whether this is just terrible political communication or something darker about a prime minister who fundamentally can't or won't engage with scrutiny. The evolution of the House of Commons language is genuinely hilarious as a piece of institutional shade. For those unfamiliar with how these things work, the House of Commons has official social media accounts that promote parliamentary proceedings to increase public engagement with democracy. Every Wednesday during PMQs, they'd post promoting the session. Throughout 2024, the formula was consistent. Keir Starmer answered questions from MPs. It's straightforward, it describes what's supposed to happen at Prime Minister's questions, and it became increasingly ridiculous as anyone watching could see that answering questions was the one thing Starmer conspicuously wasn't doing. The weekly roasting this claim received on social media was relentless and entirely justified. People would quote tweet with examples of Starmer being asked a direct question and responding with a completely unrelated talking point about the previous government's record, or being asked about a specific policy detail and launching into abstract waffle about his missions for government, or being asked to confirm a simple fact and instead reading from his red folder about economic stability. The gap between answered questions and observable reality became a running joke that made the Commons social media team look either delusional or complicit in propaganda. So the quiet change in wording to faced questions is an admission of defeat. Someone in the communications office clearly decided that continuing to claim Starmer answers questions when he manifestly doesn't was making them look ridiculous. The new phrasing is technically unchallengeable because, yes, he does face questions. He stands there while questions are asked at him. Whether he answers them is a different matter entirely, and conveniently, that's no longer being claimed. It's the kind of subtle language change that most people won't notice, but that speaks volumes about how bad things have gotten. The Tory source's quote about Starmer gripping his red folder like a life buoy is absolutely perfect imagery because anyone who watches PMQs has seen it. That red folder contains his prepared responses, his scripted attack lines on the Conservatives, his safe talking points that have been focus grouped and approved by advisors. He clutches it like it's the only thing standing between him and total exposure. And whenever a question comes that isn't on the script, whenever something unexpected gets asked or a follow-up probes deeper than anticipated, you can see the panic as he flips through looking for something, anything that's vaguely relevant. The accusation that he never thinks on his feet is devastating because it's so obviously true. Thinking on your feet requires actually engaging with what's being asked and formulating a responsive answer in real time. That takes quick thinking, deep knowledge of your brief, and confidence in your positions. Starmer has none of that in the PMQ's environment. He's got his script, and when the questions don't match the script, he just reads the script anyway and hopes nobody notices. Except everyone notices. That's the whole problem. The claim about no charm, no answers, and no substance is harsh but accurate. Charm in politics isn't about being personally likable, though that helps. It's about having the rhetorical skill to disarm criticism, turn attacks back on opponents, connect with audiences. Blair had it. Cameron had it in a different way. Boris definitely had it even when he was lying through his teeth. Starmer's got the charisma of a corporate compliance training video. There's no sparkle, no wit, no human warmth, just robotic recitation of talking points delivered with all the passion of someone reading terms and conditions. Kemi Badenoch's recent takedown about him not answering the business rates question is a perfect example of the broader pattern. Business rates are a major issue for pubs and hospitality businesses that are closing at alarming rates. Landlords are desperate for clarity on what the policy actually is, after Labor's announced changes, then revisions, then special treatment for pubs but not other businesses. It's a mess. So Badenoch asks Starmer directly to explain the policy. Simple question, should have a simple answer if you've got your brief sorted. Instead, word salad, deflection, attack lines on conservative record, everything except an actual answer to what the government's policy is. Badenoch calling it a farce from start to finish isn't political hyperbole, it's accurate description. When the Prime Minister can't or won't explain his own government's policy on a major economic issue affecting thousands of businesses, that's definitionally farcical. It suggests either he doesn't understand the policy himself, or the policy's such a contradictory mess that there's no coherent answer to give, or he's so terrified of being pinned down to specifics that he'd rather look incompetent than risk saying something that might come back to haunt him. The comparison to previous prime ministers is instructive because it shows this isn't just how PMQs works. Boris Johnson would bloviate and bluster, but he'd engage with questions, often by telling outrageous lies but at least addressing the topic. Theresa May was wooden but tried to answer, often badly, but the attempt was there. David Cameron was slick at deflecting, but would mix in actual responses with the deflections. Starmer's uniquely bad at this because he doesn't even pretend to engage. He's like a chatbot that's been fed Labor attack lines and just outputs them regardless of input. Except everyone notices. That's the whole problem. The House of Commons spokesperson's explanation about regularly refreshing and updating content is beautifully anodyne corporate speak that confirms the change while pretending it's just routine variation. We regularly refresh content, nothing to see here. Pure coincidence that we stopped claiming the Prime Minister answers questions exactly when it became undeniable that he doesn't. It's the communications equivalent of "the front fell off" as an explanation for a maritime disaster. Technically words, functionally meaningless as actual explanation. What this language change really represents is institutional embarrassment. The House of Commons is meant to be political neutral, promoting parliamentary democracy regardless of which party's in power. When their promotional materials become laughingstocks because they're making claims that are obviously false, it damages the institution's credibility. So they've adjusted to reality, removing the false claim while maintaining the promotional function. It's sensible from their perspective, but it's a damning indictment of Starmer that parliamentary authorities have given up pretending he does his job properly. The broader context of Starmer's popularity tanking is crucial for understanding why this matters. When you're riding high in the polls, you can get away with being evasive or awkward at PMQs because voters aren't paying attention and your general approval carries you through. But when your numbers are cratering, when every decision seems to alienate another chunk of voters, when the narrative is that you're incompetent and out of your depth, then your performance at PMQs becomes much more important. It's your weekly opportunity to show command, authority, competence, and Starmer's showing the opposite. The red folder has become symbolic of everything wrong with his leadership. It represents over-reliance on preparation at the expense of adaptability. It's the security blanket of someone who doesn't trust themselves to speak without a script. In visual terms, it's like a boxer entering the ring carrying a manual on how to box. You're supposed to have internalized that stuff and be executing instinctively. The fact that he needs the written answers physically in front of him to function suggests a fundamental lack of mastery of his brief. There's also something about the optics of a former prosecutor, someone who built a career on thinking on his feet in courtrooms, being completely unable to do the same in Parliament.
Prosecutors have to respond to unexpected testimony, hostile cross-examination, surprise evidence. They can't just read from scripts. So either Starmer was never actually that good at the adversarial aspects of prosecution, or the skill set doesn't translate to political combat, or he's lost the ability through lack of practice. None of those explanations reflects well. The in office but not in control line from the Tory source is brutal because it captures the impression that's settling in. Starmer is physically prime minister. He's got the title and the residence and the constitutional authority, but he doesn't seem to be actually in control of events. Things happen to his government rather than being driven by it. Policies get announced, then reversed. Ministers contradict each other. U-turns pile up. And through it all, Starmer seems passive, reactive, unable to impose coherence or direction. That's not leadership. That's just occupying the position while chaos swirls around you. PMQS is meant to be the showcase of parliamentary democracy. The public's representatives